Thank you. Thank you. Hope everyone's having a great bio. I'm here today to talk a bit about working with one service provider to seamlessly bring a molecule from late discovery, preclinical into commercial settings. And at Catalent, we think this is very important for a number of reasons, but most importantly, we feel it's important from a patient perspective. We feel quite strongly that patient first is more than a mantra. It's really a philosophy within the company of ensuring that decisions we make every day are in strong alignment with patient outcomes. And that's done through our partnerships of some of you in the audience today, as well as our partners around the world. So bringing a new drug to market, it's a very expensive undertaking, as we all know. It takes a significant amount of time. It's high risk, and the number of molecules that actually get approved every year is quite small. So we appreciate the fact that in order to do that, it's a complex requirement. You're dealing with oftentimes multiple service providers that have different expertise, that you're oftentimes moving either sequences or molecules or drug substance around the world to make it happen. And we believe there's a better way. And the way to do that is actually to partner with a single service provider that can go from your molecule or your sequence all the way through to supplying product for clinical trials. And that includes the packaging and distribution of that clinical trial material, and then ultimately manufacturing it for late stage commercial. And it's high risk, high reward, and time is very important. If you look at it from a continuum, there's a number of different activities involved. And again, service providers provide different aspects of that service along the way. At Catalent, we are strictly a service provider that performs large and small molecule services. And as a service provider, we have to make significant investments in capital and people to ensure we actually deliver our services and the molecules to our partners efficiently at high quality. One of the most important aspects of that is really speed. So if you can look at how long it takes to start a system, I'll use an example in the biologics area. If you start with a gene sequence and you have it's coding for an antibody and you want to develop it for a clinical program, you have to first go to a stable cell line that will express that gene sequence. You then have to do process development to develop a process for manufacturing. Then you move into a GMP setting where you're producing clinical grade material, oftentimes for phase 1 and phase 2. Once you have successful trials, you have to scale that manufacturing aspect up. You're actually then moving to larger scale drug product production, which then has to be distributed for clinical trials globally. And then you have management of that data and reporting to the FDA. So there's oftentimes a number of different pieces that's provided by different service providers around the world. One aspect of Catalent, as a result of a recent acquisition of Cook Pharmica, is we now have world-class biologic capabilities to go from gene sequence all the way through to distribution of clinical trial materials globally. And recently there's been some questions about really what are the key things that our partners need to be exploring when looking at what's the best approach in working with a service provider. Expertise and credibility. Has the company you're looking at, do they have the expertise? Have they done this before? Do they have trained personnel that can support your needs? Do they have the capacity? Today, in different pieces of the service aspect in providing biologics, capacity can be constrained. In the drug substance manufacturing area, there has been ebb and flows of capacity. And as a result of that, A lot of our partners are talking to us very early about how we go about managing capacity on the drug substance side. Another key component is longevity. How long has a service provider been supporting this activity? How long have they been doing the work? It's important because you want to have leadership that understands the pitfalls that might be forthcoming and being able to anticipate these activities. Flexibility. How do you go about managing flexibility when you're trying to manage a pipeline with a growing pipeline, when you have short supply of certain services at different stages of development? It's a complicated matter, and oftentimes our partners have specific departments that are dedicated to managing that supply chain. And last, really, when you're dealing with multiple service providers along the pathway, oftentimes those are looked at as a more transactional type of relationship, fee-for-service type of programs where there's not a vision. The service provider isn't looking at the whole scale of the activity in one image. That's disadvantaged because ultimately, without that understanding of the full chain, you don't appreciate, or oftentimes one service provider doesn't appreciate the impact they're having on the next one by maybe a delay or some aspect of the services that they're not delivering. So the transactional versus strategic is very important. So, we think there's a significant benefit in using one single service provider to deliver drug, and I'll use an example on the Biologics side. And part of what I'm going to reference today was as a result of a paper published by Tufts University through the lab of Damasi and Smith, looking at the economics of using a single-use service provider versus a multi-vendor manufacturing approach. And I think this is quite a powerful paper because I think it quantifies both in time as well as in financial gains the advantages by using a single service provider. So the background for this study, which is, I'm just going to touch on the biologics aspect of it. They looked at two monoclonal antibodies that are going into phase 1 clinical trials, as well as a single monoclonal antibody that's going into a phase 3 clinical trial. It's a single company, and they're comparing time and cost of single source versus multi-source. You'll see here one of the key outcomes of the study was showing that if you're working with a single source supplier who can provide all aspects of that supply chain, you're looking at it. If you look at the green circles, you've got you've got phase 3, which is in the top, and the two single monoclonal antibodies, phase 1 on the bottom. You'll see that there's significant amount of time savings that is appreciated as a result of using a single source service provider such as Catalent. We have a number of our partners that are early stage venture funded companies where time is critical and very valuable. It's critical because the faster you can get that life-saving potential drug to patients, you're going to have a more rapid impact. But also, from a cost standpoint, time to market is important. You've got a longevity for patent life. You've got burn rates for startup companies where they're actually having to staff their people for longer periods of time on single programs that should be shifted. But the take-home message here is that for a phase 3 program, going single source versus multiple service providers, you're looking at an 18-week time savings, which in the world of biotech development is significant and extremely valuable. And from our perspective, extremely meaningful from a patient perspective. On the bottom, you'll see the two phase 1 antibodies. The one example is a 14-week time savings. The other is an 11. But overall, even with a small molecule, they came up with a determination of a mean value of about 14 weeks in general. So again, 14 weeks of time savings by working with a single service provider along that chain, which goes from, again, early development through to supply of clinical programs, clinical drug. From a financial perspective, this is important because if we can lower the cost of investment to develop new therapies, it will allow the industry to provide more opportunities for life-saving drugs to get to market quicker. And from a financial perspective, you'll see, again, it's quite substantial. For a phase 3 monoclonal antibody using a single